Indian consumers have the most discerning taste globally. Living and working in a foreign countries is quite challenging things for any kind of the people. We as a company have to, pay more attention to the very subtle needs and the subtle demands of the consumers. Partnering, working with the various creative partners, various agencies is getting more critical.
Hey there,
Hi.
welcome to Marketing Mavericks by IndieFolio. Today we have Hirokazu Kotera with us, who's the Vice President of Marketing at Kansai Nerolac. Very excited to have a conversation with him about his journey, his perspective on marketing to Indians from an external point of view, and also discuss a lot more. Thanks a ton for your time, Hirokazu. Welcome to the podcast. So my first question to you is, very few people in India have come from Japan and are marketing to Indians, right? So how is it that you stumble upon such an opportunity? If you can take us through your journey till now.
Yeah. Thank you, Kavan. Let me briefly introduce about myself and as to how I had come so far in my career. So after graduation of my degrees, after obtaining my degrees at Japan, I have commenced my career as a product marketing manager in the marketing department at Nestle Japan. At that time, my interest was in the brand marketing, which is focusing on the how to cultivate and how to sustain a robust brand and how to build a solid positioning in the consumer's mind. So joining Nestle, of course, globally well-known brand seemed the best ideal option to gain practical knowledge and the insights beyond theory. So during my 5 years at Nestle Japan, I worked on the development of the European chocolate brands like KitKat and Nestle Aero. I'm not sure whether you have heard of the brand of Nestle Aero, but of course for the KitKat for sure in the Japanese market. And my responsibility included designing and executing communication strategies and translating them into a sales strategy, like go-to-market strategy, and developing business plans for the assigned brand. So I have approached brand cultivation from both the microscopic and also the macroscopic perspectives. So this period at Nestle Japan established the foundation for my professional ethics, code of conduct, and the fundamental principles of the marketing and businesses. However, I have started to gain a new ambition, which is to expand the Japanese domestic brand into international markets rather than localizing foreign brands in Japanese market. So I have decided to move to another company. I have chosen to work with Newell Rubbermaid, which is an American company. But the Newell Rubbermaid in Japan at that time was dealing with a lot of Japanese famous brands. So I think I will get the opportunity to split these Japanese-driven brands into China or any other international markets. So after joining in the Newell Rubbermaid, I have engaged in the overseas brand marketing as I was expecting. So after spending 5 years at Newell, I have moved to my previous company, which is Nissin Foods. Nissin Foods is well known as instant noodle investors. And here in India also, they have big operations called Indonesian Foods. I have engaged in the management with various overseas business companies and also worked in a global marketing. And actually, this was the period which I began to establish strong connections with India and the Indian consumers. And after spending some years in Nissin, in 2017, I have joined in Kansai Paint, where I was involved in designing and executing business strategies for the Asia and the Africa market. And from 2022, I have been assigned to Kansai Nerolac Paints in India, where I am the only foreign national at the headquarters in Mumbai. While focusing on the marketing, I am also being part of the management committee, and I am involved in the various management matters of the Kansai Nerolac. So, in a nutshell, I think I have intentionally crafted the career somewhat different from the typical Japanese businessman. While this trend is gradually changing, conventional career path for many Japanese professionals still nowadays is, joining a company after graduation and working until retirement, rotating through various departments according to the company orders, and conducting work exclusively in Japanese within Japan. So I didn't like this, a very conventional way of career development. So I have deliberately pursued a career which is distinct from this trajectory. On a slightly unrelated note, I think the fundamental aspect of career development is how one can become a rare card. I am not sure whether you are familiar with the Japan-born anime and game character Pokemon. Originally, this is of course a child. Yeah. Originally, this is a children's card game, and some of these cards are traded for over ₹1 million, million of the dollars. So having just one skill you are good at doesn't make much of a difference. If you can possess 3 skills or experiences that only 1 in 100 people have, you automatically become a rare card at a ratio of 1 in a million. So being conscious about this, I have considered which skills to enhance, which stage of the brand life cycle to manage, which business to experience, etc. So this is a very, fundamental mind I have had so far.
I absolutely love that analogy. I think I fully agree with you. I think you've had a very different career, like a rare Pokemon.
Yeah.
So I must ask you this question that if you pick a path like this, it's pretty challenging. Like if I was to decide between marketing to consumers who I know exactly because I'm part of them versus try and understand somebody very different, right? You've said you mentioned Europe and Africa and India, a lot of other parts of Asia as well. How do you deal with something like that? Because isn't it so difficult for you then to understand the consumer as well as you'd understand somebody locally? Why do you decide to take on such a big challenge?
Yeah, thank you, Kavan. You are absolutely right. Understanding and first of all, what living and working in a foreign countries is quite challenging things for any kind of the people. But at the same time, I would say that working and living and also understanding the consumer in a marketing perspective is very much exciting. Which you will never gain in your own countries. And of course, the experience of trying to understand the local consumers, local needs, and then providing something new to these new people is surely giving me opportunity to grow further as a professional business person. For example, in case of India, the local consumer, if you understand the local consumers' needs, insight, etc., you must be Indian. And I can't be Indian, although I'm trying to be. But understanding the essence of the how people act, how people think, how people behave, is a very critical and giving me a fresh view and perspectives.
I'm sure. I think it's a great wave to make you a little bit uncomfortable and for you to explore how the world thinks, right? I think you will be in a great position to understand how consumers are so alike but also so different at the same time. So that brings me to my next question. I'd love to know from you what's been your perspective on marketing to Indians. You had to come in, you had to understand what we like, what we do. What's been your top takeaways on what an Indian consumer is?
Yeah, thank you. Firstly, I believe that the Indian consumers have the most discerning taste globally. Having worked in the marketing areas in the countries like Japan, China, Malaysia, or any other, African countries, I find the Indian market and consumers to be the most tough and challenging, to be honest. I can summarize the reasons into four key points. First of all, the trade-off between the price and product quality. Actually, I see, from my point of view, I see there is no concept of trade-off between price and product quality. Providing products that are both reasonable and of high quality is a very, very essential starting point when you want to offer any products to Indian customers. Indian customers are very severe. They want to be satisfied in terms of the price as well as the quality simultaneously. And the second point is a strong uniqueness and limited applicability of global marketing methods, I would say. Strong uniqueness and the limited applicability of marketing methods and best practices which worked in other countries. India, with its rich, rich and ancient history, has established its very unique culture and business practices and social norms. So understanding this concept is very much crucial, and success often requires time, because we as a foreign national and foreign companies must be adapted to the Indian context fully. And third point, I would say, is diversity. India is a very much diverse country. India's diversity across region, social strata, age groups, languages, and also the religions makes it very much challenges. I often explain to my Japanese colleagues who are visiting India for the first time, there are many Indias within India, and each is a true India. Marketing, essentially a mass game, becomes challenging in such a, diverse environment. Final point is dynamism and speed. The dynamism and speed of India's economic growth, urban development, and the rapid improvement in people's quality of life are unparalleled in today's world. Everyone is now starting to focus on Indian market and the Indian economy and the Indian people. So unlike in countries like Japan, where government or the corporation lead social development, in India, the tremendous energy from the entire country and the people requires the entities, companies to adapt rapidly to meet the growing and evolving needs of the consumers and customers in India.
Fantastic insights. I mean, you articulated them so well into those 4 points. I fully resonate with how India is so many Indias, and as a marketer, that's so important for you to know, because we come in all shapes and sizes, in all kinds of demography, all kinds of purchasing power.
Yeah.
So one product needs to be spoken of in so many ways today to sell to India holistically, and I think you've gotten that bang on. Do you at the same time see any similarities when you compare, let's say, Indians and people in Japan?
Yeah. Actually, Japan is also seen as a very unique market like India. But one common thing which I keep in mind is that as well as the Indian consumers, Japanese consumers are, how do you say, very much sensitive to the very niche product benefits and functional benefits. They are always looking for something new which can enrich their quality of life. And Indian consumers are also paying much attention to those details, exactly as how this product can, bring us anything, can enrich my life. This kind of needs is quite strong, and we as a marketer, we as a company have to, pay more attention to the very subtle needs and the subtle demands of the consumers in Japan and in India.
Absolutely. I think, in Amazon had this tagline some time ago called "Aur Dikhao," which means show me more. It's like a very Indian thing to be like, hey, I want to see more options. I want to see more functionality. I want to see more variety. So I think when I do look at some segments, I guess in Japan, I do also see now that, yeah, actually there is something they really love about the way things are. Like there is some hook somewhere, or there is some chain somewhere in these products, because they're very innovative and unique. Like even coming across all that content on Instagram. I now want to segue into your general thought behind how marketers partner with agencies. And I think you've spent some time with Nerolac already, and in India, as far as I know, FCB Ulka has been really helping Nerolac make a brand name in the country. So I wanted to ask you, I mean, I'm not sure if you specifically can give me points about FCB Ulka, but what's your take on client relationships with agencies, right? If there are, let's say, agency owners looking at this, what, according to you, has in your career so far made agency partners stand out from the clutter?
First of all, based on my experiences in the past previous companies, partnering with one common and a specific advertising agency or branding partner is a very critical thing, in terms of the accumulating the brand equity, because, brand cannot be built in one day, or brand cannot be made by one advertisement or one big campaign or something, but it requires certain amount of time and a certain amount of efforts, and all those communications, campaigns, or any other connections with the consumers, customers must be consistent and must be understood in a very clear tone and manner and messages. So from this perspective, partnering with one branding agency for quite a long time is very, very critical, because we from brand side don't need to brief to them every time, because they already understand the concept of the brand, and also they understand the consumers, so we don't have to worry about that. However, according to me, in today's world, nowadays, I think the people's needs against the paint also, food also, or any other consumer goods also, changing rapidly, and we as a brand have to keep changing by creating the news or the surprises to the consumers. Because, if we stick to the original brand equity for quite long time, it bore the consumers. So we have to keep providing the news, because this is a way which brand can be revitalized. So in this sense, I think also, partnering, working with the various creative partners, various agencies is getting more critical, according to me.
100%. I think what I make of what you mentioned here is that a really good agency partner at the end of the day becomes the brand custodian. I think they any which ways are hired to do things today in an omni-channel point of view. With you, there's also various kinds of customers in like tier one metros to even rural areas.
Yeah.
So they need to understand how the brand resonates across the board without you worrying. So I think a lot of agencies, what they don't do is really research and understand and empathize with the customer and the segment. It's a lot about execution. And I think the ones who do think and strategize and put themselves in your shoes tend to do really, really well. Based on that, I think of another question now. I mentioned, how you market to the rural India and, folks in metros as well. So can you unpack that a little bit again for us? From what I understand, I think rural is a big focus for you. So from a marketing lens, how do you market, Nerolac differently to rural versus the metro population?
First of all, as you mentioned, the rural and metro taste is quite different. And as I mentioned earlier today, there's a lot of Indias within India. So we are taking very different approaches to the metro and local. So if I take some example in case of metro, majority of our business comes from decorative paints, and decorative paints is categorized into two segments, which is retail and also project. So in a metro, like Mumbai, where we are living, there has been a growing demand of the project as well. So project means, the condominiums or newly establishing condominium or renovation of the condominium, or residential apartments. This kind of growth is there. This is very constant needs is there. So we have to catch up with it. And consumers in the metro regions are more easy to take on new things. They want to try new things, and they want to have better products with better functionality, better colors, etc. So catching up with the consumers in metro region is quite important in terms of the capturing the needs of the project businesses and the capturing the consumers' needs. So we are relatively taking new and fresh approaches to the metropolitan areas. However, on the contrary, in the rural area, which I understand that there is very much economical challenges in the rural area because of the some monsoon issue, climate issue, or any other macroeconomic issues. So we, of course, Nerolac strength lies also in the rural area, but we are not only focusing on rural area because as I mentioned, the metro is expanding, so we have we need to work a lot more on the metro. But in rural area, what makes important is to how we can localize the content to each rural, the locals. For example, if you go to the any rural part, any other state, if we go to south, you have to adjust your language, you have to adjust your marketing campaign, you have to change brand ambassador to a local one. So this kind of localization is quite essential. And we should be making more efforts to, adapt to the local consumers' interests.
Got it. Very curious. I think when you say you do get significant revenue, let's say from tier 2, rather tier 3 and rural, what is it that the consumer is buying this for? Is it that because from what I assume, and I could be completely wrong, they don't have discretionary income to decide which paint to put. It's usually whatever they can do to create some structure. So is it that you're doing contracts with, let's say, the government or the private sector, or are actual consumers buying paint for themselves?
Yeah. Basically, we have paint dealers which deal with multi-brand paints, and the painters or the consumers directly come to the paint shop, and they choose which brand to buy. At this time, the key point we need to understand is the house owners or the painters are easily influenced by the shop owners or the peer painters. If homeowners want to renovate their house, repaint their interiors, they don't have knowledge about the paints, which brand is better, and so they listen to others. So in terms of this, approaching and letting influencers understand our brand is quite essential. Yeah.
So you basically, at the end of the day, sell to the distributor, not really the end consumer, because they then localize it and become your recommendation engine for the end customer, I'm assuming, right?
Exactly. Yeah. We are selling to the dealers. Yeah. The dealers.
Right. So then how do you so can you tell me about how marketing is different for B2B versus B2C as well?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. Yeah. So as you said, B2C marketing, in this case, the marketing to the consumers, customers, same. This is almost same as, more or less the same as the FMCG categories. And we are, targeting to the end consumers as well as the middle consumers, not middle, I mean, dealers or distributors. We have to both approach to them by advertising, TBC, campaigns, digital media, etc. On the other hand, in terms of the B2B marketing, for example, Nerolac is very prominent in the automotive paint industry and also industrial paint industry. So majority of the cars produced in India are actually painted by the Kansai Nerolac Paints. And obviously, to be honest, we don't need to spend a lot of advertisement spending in the B2B area because, it is said that more than tens or 20,000 of the paint manufacturers are there in the world, but only 4 or 5 paint manufacturers can afford to supply paints to the automotive customers, I would say. So because of the, this requires a lot of technical knowledges, technical superiorities, and we are very much superior in terms of the technology. So, because customers, let's say in a B2B segment, they have a very limited options of the buying paints, because not many paint manufacturers can provide them the paint. So rather than spending marketing expenditure on the advertising, promotion, etc., we are spending more on the strengthening the relationship with the B2B customers, one-on-one marketing with the business partners. So this is a very different point in B2B and the B2C marketing.
Very cool. I didn't know that only 4 or a handful people supply to automobile. I'll read more about that. I actually want to poke you a little bit more because I do B2B marketing, right? And usually what happens with us is our customers are also brands like you. We have realized that it's really something which is successful when sales and marketing talk to each other. You said automobile is a big segment for you. So I wanted to understand that while it is sales led, where does marketing come in? Is there anything you do in terms of a channel also? What marketing channel you use to get to the B2B customers?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. So, to be honest, there is not very large room for the marketing to play at this area, because as you rightly said, this is a very much sales-driven area. So what marketing can do or what marketing can support is, how do you say, not advertising, but the, how do you say, it's more like information providing. I mean, because we are partnering with industries, we are very sensitive to the move of the any other companies or the new trend of the company industry itself. So we have information and we have also technology. We are always up to the technology trend of the paint. So this kind of, providing these new trends of the industry, technology is kind of a tool which we can provide them. I mean, in terms of the marketing, I'm not sure whether it is right to use the word of marketing or not, but because as I mentioned, sales is playing more important role here.
Right. No, I think that's fair. I believe you're absolutely right. I think communications and compiling of that content maybe into your very beautiful catalogs or talking more about how you are the best in your vertical or trust building content. I think is fairly what works. But point noted, I think it is a sales heavy function for a paints company when you are doing B2B, but B2C is where I think most energy goes into because I guess of the rising customer demands, as you said.
Yeah.
You mentioned, how your decoration segment is really, really popular. And me and my team actually read somewhere that actually over time, the woman has moved from being an influencer to being a decision maker. So is this a right assumption? Have you seen these trends? And if so, how have you changed your marketing keeping this in mind?
That's a wonderful observation you have. You are 100% right. So as you pointed out, the selection process and the purchasing behavior for the paints in India used at home have changed a lot, have evolved, I would say, with the voice of women, especially in this case, wives in the family. They are increasingly influencing the final decision. I believe this is due to complex social changes. And personally, I think the COVID-19 might have further, exacerbated this trend, because during the peak of the COVID pandemic, of course, not only limited to India, but people started spending more time in their homes. Before COVID, the concept of my home had a strong connotation as place where the family lives together. However, after COVID, it seems to have changed into more than just a place and evolved into something like sheltering presence, or a protector of the family. So the concept of home is changing according to me. So in this context, functional values such as, what specific benefits does this product provide, or how does it protect my family, have become more crucial than the conceptual values like color or brand. So as a result, women who spend a lot of time at home, where their family's health is most important. So they are likely to scrutinize and carefully choose each brand and look into the functions and then make a final decision. So this is a very rapidly changing trend, I would say.
So you're saying now that the woman decides instead of the men, they go a little much more deeper into really understanding what should I buy versus, let's say, a typical man not caring beyond a point. Is that true?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So we have to be,
Okay. Okay.
prepared for that, we have to be answering to those queries and requests and etc.
That's very interesting. I never thought about that. I think now I'll just hop into just a few last questions, and I'm very curious to know what you have to say about this because I see this problem happening to most marketing companies, and in fact, the reason IndieFolio exists is to solve this problem, which is creativity becomes a big bottleneck for companies. I think uh, generally it is one thing which is very difficult to scale and grow. So how do you really solve this problem? And while you answer this, if you can even tell me what Nerolac's creative stack is, right? Like how do you currently do marketing? Is it in-house, outsourced, any partners? It'll be awesome to just have that information from you.
According to me, I believe the creating brand through advertising has come to an end. Why do I say this? Because it's very crucial for our business as well. Because not all products in the market are associated with the big brands, right? So about 20 years ago, a book titled The Fall of Advertising and the Rise of PR was released. This is my Bible, actually. And it suggests at that time, advertising is on the decline. It's all about PR now. I think this come true in this era. The evidence for this is abundant. Actually, how did we learn about Microsoft or Dell computers? How did we come to know the brand of Starbucks or Uniqlo? These are not through advertising. Most likely, we have first heard about them in the news. Even the iPhone. Initially, no one didn't know about it, but they didn't heavily rely on advertising, but it sold incredibly well. So, they created the brand through the news, as I mentioned earlier. They are concentrating on the making the news because news is more crucial. Whether it's positive or negative, it is something that people can't keep on themselves. They want to share it with the other people, you know. In today's age of developed social media, if you can create some news, you can quickly convey it to large audiences. So conversely, even if you spend a lot of money on TBC, people might skip it. We focus on creating positive news for the brand. So the creativity to generate such news is what makes essential. So this is my first point, I would say.
I think that's a fantastic observation. Uh, so just there is like I fully agree with you, right? Because of this, a brand needs to create so much content, and they have to be so creative every day, right? So how do you do that?
As I mentioned, we work with not only one agency, but we are working with multiple partners and agency, and also more importantly, we as a Kansai Paint Group, we have a lot of best practices or knowledge which can be gained from other parts of the world, Japan, Europe, Turkey, or etc. If you name it. So this kind of new perspectives or new observations are really eye-opening to us. So by gaining such new insights, new observations, we are provide something new with the customers, understanding the what's working on other countries doesn't always succeed in India. However, having said so, we can still learn a lot and we can implement it in a different context in India. So we are trying to be international. Think globally and act locally in India. So this is our concept of behaving marketing.
Got it. That's really insightful. So, you said you work with multiple agencies. What are the kind of different areas you partner with agencies on?
Okay, that can be categorized into the which brand or which products. Depending on the brand products, we are working. We are working with other agencies, and also in the digital area or in the activation area. Of course, we are working with the other exclusive agencies. So this kind of by brand or by the how do you say, by the category of the brand. By the phase of
Understood.
the executions we are changing. Yeah.
Got it. Very interesting. So, like every brand may have a unique agency or every specialization. Like if you want to do digital or activation, they'll basically have a separate industry. Understood. And do you have an in-house team as well, other than marketing? Do you have like creative people, folks in production, and so on?
Actually, no, as of now. However, the importance of having designers or creative team in-house is becoming more important, according to me, because, we are now starting to introduce very design-oriented paints for the interiors, which comes from Italy and Japan. For those customers who are very much sensitive to the designing trend, because there is a growing demand for the designing areas. So in order to cope with these kind of consumers, and in order for us to convey the right product to the customers, we must have professional designers in-house, because we didn't have such in-house resources, but we are starting to realize how it is important to have such in-house designers and creatives.
Absolutely. Hey, so thanks a lot. It's been lovely getting all these insights from you, Hirokazu. That was my last question, to understand finally how does Nerolac produce the great work it does in marketing and advertising. So once again, thanks a lot for tuning in. Absolutely loved some moments as well. And for everybody who's tuned in so far, thanks for staying with us all the way till the end, and watch out for the next one.